I am candidate Mark Stewart, and I wanted to answer a question that is important. It's one of the easiest ones to answer, though. So here we go. Is America a racist nation? My answer is that we need to make a distinction between the American government and the American people. And there's actually many levels of government as well, local, federal, state. The vast majority of American people are not racist. If anything, a good number of white Americans fervently help blacks succeed. UNICEF, which is mostly funded by whites, gives far more of its funds to blacks than to Caucasians. And until just a few years ago, the United Negro College Fund had a majority of its funding from white Americans. It would be hard to find another nation whose majority race does more for the races of minorities than Americans do. So yes, there are a few white crackers. They're largely in the rural South. There might be a few pockets even in the North and the Midwest where there's some remaining hatred. Now look, there's pockets of African Americans that hate whites. And much of that is politically fed racism, unfortunately. But that makes me hopeful that when our politics get more sane, that everyone's hatred diminishes. Here's why you know we are not a racist country. The majority of white people, for 19 out of 21 straight years, voted as most Admirable American the following blacks: Colin Powell, Tiger Woods, Michael Jordan, Barack Obama. Okay? By a majority of white people. Condi Rice, by the way, placed pretty high in those polls. Russell Wilson will probably place high in the polls again if he wins the next Super Bowl. You know we are not a racist nation when interracial dating, it's a non-issue. And if you look not even closely, just go to your average suburban school. Even in the Deep South, the children see zero differences among the races of their classmates. This is an older person's phenomenon, and thankfully it is getting diminished year by year. Unfortunately, our governments remain racist in some ways. Our federal government has policies that continue to hurt blacks. Some are indirect, like Social Security. It's a very regressive tax. It hurts blacks more than any other race. Professional licensing laws, not meant directly to punish blacks, but they hurt city blacks who want to establish businesses of their own or work in other businesses and face really big costs just to be hairdressers or drivers of certain vehicles. The crackdown on drug sales has hurt blacks far more than whites. And the public school monopoly, and that's continued federal, state, and local levels, it hurts blacks far more than whites. Ask African American moms with kids in urban schools. Would they give a 5-star rating to the administration of their schools? Almost none of them would. Suburban white moms, a lot of them like the schools that they are in. The government laws that are directly there to penalize African Americans, well, Davis-Bacon, it's still on the books. In the 1930s, it was overtly passed to hold down black workers. It's still enforced today. When liberals take reins, they do race-based things to help blacks, but that too is racist. Now, I'm not saying that doing nice things with regard to one's race is an inherently bad activity. It is a racist activity because you're taking into account race. So the word is not inherently bad unless there are bad consequences. Affirmative action in the 1960s for Negroes was proper. It's because of blacks' unique status of having been enslaved, and even after slavery was ended, having laws that were passed by states directly to hurt them. And even outside of laws, conditions based on their race, lynchings, segregated schools, segregated restaurants, even drinks and buses and water fountains, okay? Unique status and proper as a remedy for a short amount of time. 60s, 70s, even into the 80s, it was the right thing to do. I think we are 20 to 30 years beyond it being the right thing to do. And affirmative action right now causes a lot of problems, and it's unnecessary given the elevated status of African Americans now. By the way, I don't think the elevated status was largely due to government policy with affirmative action. I think it was due to more and more awareness, more and more freedom that let people see the talents, the goodness of African Americans, whether they were neighbors, and it helped when they became more and more neighborly with whites, and it became more and more apparent that we really didn't have that many differences. The difference between the native-born African-American man, native-born white man in America are so minuscule compared to either one of us in comparison to a Japanese, in comparison to an Arabian. Our government has not followed enough Martin Luther King's dictum that we should discriminate only on merit. This could be turned around in the next few years. I hope that by the end of the next decade, that this isn't even a question.